Greetings, rabble rousers. My name is Jessa McLean. Welcome to Blueprints for Disruption, a weekly discussion dedicated to amplifying activism across Turtle Island. Together, we will examine tactics, explore motivations, and celebrate successes in disrupting the status quo. This podcast is a proud part of New Left Media. Welcome to another edition of Blueprints of Disruption. Today I have with me activist, teacher, and ally Anna Jessup. Anna is part of a group called Fund Our Communities and Defund the Police. They're a Toronto-based group that, among other things, have a weekly rally at the Toronto Police headquarters every Thursday evening. During our interview, Anna makes it clear that she is just one person, one contributor, a settler, who's doing what she believes is needed from all allies. She sees herself as just a small contributor amongst those that she describes as much braver than herself. For the organizers and activists listening out there, I encourage you to pay particular attention to the intersectional approach Fund Our Communities and Defund the Police uses, and the various ways that different groups can help each other out. Like the other episodes that we've done, we're not just going to explore their tactics, but also their motivations. We're going to hear about the relationship building that needs to be at the center of all great movement building. As we all should, Anna continually learns from those around her. We'll hear about how she uses that knowledge and relies on her comrades to create spaces for folks to really connect, share, and ultimately fight back against police violence and colonial oppression. Let's listen in. Anna's going to introduce herself. We hate speaking for people here. So Anna, please tell us, who are you and what do you do?
Well, I'd have to say the most fun thing I do is raise my 12-year-old child, Max. And then I also for fun and for a paycheck, I'm an elementary school teacher in the Toronto District School Board in the northeast area of Scarborough in a really wonderful community called Malvern. And and then I also do work with a group called Fund Our Communities, Defund the Police, named after the banner. And it's that we carry, and it's a grassroots group. We meet every Thursday outside of Toronto Police headquarters with a banner that says Fund Our Communities, Defund the Police. And because we're there consistently, it's drawn some a steady some regulars, and it's a community that I really enjoy being with.
Every Thursday, no fail, rain, shine, no matter what.
Not yet.
And what are you doing down there?
Well, our demand is transfer wealth from police, military, and big business into sustainable, publicly owned infrastructure in the hands of the people. So we chose that because every oppressed people struggle at some point must confront the police. And that means that every struggle, regardless of where geographically, regardless of where intersectionally, at some point can benefit from that struggle because whether it's here, whether it's in Guatemala, or any place in the world, colonial capital pays police to do its dirtiest work.
So we'll get a little bit more into the issue of defunding the police and funding our communities. But I mean, when you're down there, are you engaging with people? You've got a banner, obviously, to let people know exactly what your messaging is. Do you leaflet? Do you engage people? Do you engage the police? I mean, they must be down there. It's their headquarters.
Yeah, they engage us. Actually, they are. You know what? They are regulars. It's really sweet. They are a regular audience, and this is beneficial sometimes because people who have been incarcerated and who are also victims of residential schools have a lot to say to the police. And since they're stationed there, they can't really leave their captive audience. So basically what we do, we have banner, we have this rope that goes between two trees right in front of the entrance to the Toronto Police headquarters, which is also next door to Native Child and Family Services. not so coincidentally. Um, so that's like a Palestinian flag, and land back, progressive pride flag, like all the intersectional struggles. We have a sound system, and it's an open mic with a speaking order in inverse order to your intersectional privilege. So that means racialized women speak first, and it's an open mic, like and we usually do a live stream, so people who have been on the front line of police violence, which is to be on the front line of colonial oppression, tell their story. And while they tell their story, we live stream, flyers go out. We also make sure to promote work being done by racialized grassroots organizations, anti-colonial, anti-racist, abolitionist groups, so that we are very focused on putting our people power behind other groups that might need like labor done for them. So flyering, spoken word, and we're right across the street from a posh bar where the cops like to hang out, and there's usually a patio there, and so we've got an audience there too. We play music. Oftentimes we'll take the street and just like dance. There's often round dance, and because it's very much led by the Indigenous folks who come out, who have all this great music, right? So,
This
so there's
sounds
music and there's
fabulous.
dancing, and sometimes we'll just sit in the street. It's fun.
Oh my goodness. I had no idea, to be honest, to the extent of the participation level, because something so sustained, every week. How do you have the energy to put something like that together every single week?
It's not like it's always a lot of people. And, the very first time, I'll confess to have had to having weekly Wednesday night panic attacks. Oh my God, it's Toronto Police Headquarters. Boom, 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 boom. What's going to happen? Imagining all these things. It's been fine. I'm not saying that it isn't tricky sometimes. But I also wondered about the numbers of people. Like, how are we going to maintain people every week? And I decide, and the first time that we did it, I thought to myself, okay, I'm just going to convey to people that, like, this is about the organizing. It's not about demonstrating. Like, you can't demonstrate your power before you have organized it. And if we are here every Thursday, people will know to find us here. And so, during the worst weather here in Toronto, sometimes it was just two of us. Sometimes it was my friend Richard and me, and that was it. But not usually. It's not like, we usually get, at least 10 people. Sometimes it's more. Sometimes a demo that's walking nearby will join us. And so there was this beautiful confluence of pro-Palestinian land back demonstration just filling the street once. And that's not it. I mean, there's other stuff too. There's also Land Back Square.
Tell me more.
And there were some there are these other groups that because one thing that we do is just put resources behind, like, if you want to build alliances and to help organize the left in Toronto, it's important to kind of notice who can use help, who can use a banner, who can use some people to put out flyers, who can use people postering their stuff, and then to offer those as services, as just like, here, we'll volunteer this for you. You need a banner? Oh, you want a banner that says Wet'suwet'en Strong? Fantastic. Oh, you want to take Dundas Square and turn it into Land Back Square? Sounds awesome. Okay, we'll make a banner, and then just put it together. And then there's this incredible group that, with a lot of people who are also at Toronto Police Headquarters every week, who occupied formerly Dundas Square, Yonge and Dundas, every Sunday from 4:00 until whenever people get tired. And so there's a lot of crossover there, and that turns into a street party. It's incredible how we just go there and stand in the intersection. And I felt like as a settler, I'm not recognized as any kind of leader in other communities, because like for someone else, Joey Twin will be recognized as a contact person for Toronto Police Headquarters, or they might know Benici, or they might know Musqueam. Like there are other people who they'll contact, right? And of course, and Landback Square is even more so Indigenous led, and so someone. And there's something about that for me as a settler who does not have as much courage as the people I organize with straight up. I get a lot of courage from someone just saying, okay, I'm like, okay, what do I do now? Like, just stand here, hold the banner. Okay. All right. And the cars are all coming, honking, I'm like, okay, buddy. So you're going to be an asshole. Okay. So here is I'm just recording I'm live streaming your license plate. Okay. And then eventually they calm down, or sometimes you just make eye contact and just hold up your fists and try to cheer them up, and they do. But eventually, regardless of the tactic, they get the picture that the intersection is closed. They're not going through. And then people begin, and then after the border to each entry point to Landback Square has been closed, then cars just begin to detour themselves. People begin to come in, set up the sound system. And then the speakers start, and it's Indigenous speakers, women who have fought to get their children back, who know the inside of the prison system, from being from unjust convictions, and who are 60 scoop survivors and residential school survivors. Like a number of the people who are, like a large number of these people are from that generation of residential schools, and will describe in detail the trauma beginning with the residential school system onward through the prison system, and being targeted by police trafficking. So there's a lot of knowledge about the logistics of human trafficking, and the way it systemically preys on Indigenous women, that you will get right there listening to women on the microphone telling you about it. And so that's going on while people watch, block off the borders. Eventually the police show up. At first there have been times when they've been hostile. I was not there during a lot of those times. When it was first established, one car I saw it on YouTube. I wasn't there. Drove right through the banner and just carried the banner, like wet, sweat, and strong, right up Yonge Street, flapping in the wind. So we made another banner. But lately, cars have been more respectful, and the police, when they show up, they'll block the intersections so that to keep everyone safe. And they kind of do some of that work for us. And then eventually young people show up and fill up the streets and play music. And it's like this dance party going down from Dundas to wherever on Yonge. So it can be a lot of fun. But it's not, it can also be tricky. You got to have your wits about you, right? So.
Yeah, I imagine like when the live streaming, I imagine that's as much as reach out as it is protection as well, right? That you're documenting what's happening, and like you said, kind of thwarting the onslaught of haters by letting them know that they are going to go viral should they misbehave. But, taking up space in front of Toronto Police Headquarters, that's quite the decision to do that. And that's a very busy intersection. Yonge and Dundas could be very disruptive.
They are separate locations. Like, I might have been confusing in how I presented it, but they are within walking distance, within a good, an easy walking distance.
Yeah, and you haven't just disrupted the traffic or the flow, but you've actually created a space to hear stories, to disseminate critical information that folks are clearly not getting through other channels. So, when it was first described to me, it was a demo. I pictured a banner, some leaflets, hashtag defund the police, but it's clearly so much more than that. Even from the way that you've structured it, that you've providing a bit of an alternative way of doing things, and that space you're creating. That's very, like, I imagine maybe that wasn't the initial, like the very first time you guys went down on a Thursday and stood outside. Was it reactionary? Was it in response to one of these horrific displays of police brutality. Can you remember that first Thursday where
Oh,
you
I certainly can. Yeah.
tell us? Yeah.
I was inspired. I got the idea from Jewish Women Against the Occupation, because years ago they used to, and I think there's another group that still does, consisting of many of the same people, occupy the space outside the Israeli consulate on Bloor Street in Toronto every Friday, consistently, no matter what. And someone told me about that, and I thought, wow, that's so cool, right? Because I know where to find them. I can fit it into my schedule. I can just be there. Their steady presence, and it stuck with me. And I thought about the power of that to draw people, to build a community, and actually to just sort of like occupy, to claim a space for people. That there was something about that seemed that was effective to me and reliable, and so I didn't know how to do it. I was thinking about all kind, but I thought this is a really important thing to do. And then during the pandemic, we started doing something similar called, with Social Housing Green Deal. And then decided to the group of us decided that Fund Our Communities, Defund the Police was just more pertinent, because it resonates with all the different movements. Like it's really, it gets to like the penetrating spike of colonialism, when it gets you personally, it's through the police or the military, right? Very often, right? But it's from one of those budget lines. And but yeah, it was about occupying space, creating a consistent space. A good friend, an old friend of mine, John Moore, around the same time, had been holding regular sacred fire in Dufferin Grove, and had over years like established this community by being regular there. And I forget what day it was. He'd always be inviting me out, and I didn't go, blah, blah, blah. Then I really, but he was doing something so significant, so important, building community with other people there. And that community very much is like part of who, like that community. A lot of those folks come to our events, to come to the events at Toronto Police Headquarters. And so John Moore deserves a lot of credit in building that community, and having that consistent space, right? You know where to find us on a bad day. You just want to see some friends. You can find these people right here.
Because that's one thing I definitely wanted to ask you is, why this approach, why this regular weekly, which to like an organizer to me sounds exhausting, but then so reliable, like you said, about the Jewish Women Against the Occupation, that you knew where to find them. And that is so comforting, especially in a city with so many people that are so frustrated by so many things. And if they just knew that, maybe not this Thursday, but next Thursday I can be there, or the following Thursday, or the way that you described another demonstration, would know that if it's on a Thursday and they pass by, they could end up at a bit of a street party. And that consistency is so critical, I think, to building the community, right? It allows that accessibility. So again, if you're not available this Thursday, next Thursday, join us. You like this week? We are here again next week. Bring a friend. It makes it so much easier. There's no doodle poll. When are y'all available? That one-time deal, and then live streaming it. Obviously, people can then participate. Do you find those days, though, that it's just maybe the two of you in the rain? Do you ever think of stopping? Do you ever think? No. That's
well, I mean, one thing, it's really, I mean, there was a point where I was like, I can't do this. Like, someone else has have to. But then I realized, hold on. This is actually like I don't have to. Other people want to do it. And so it's just that also that like holding it enough that you realize, okay, like there's so many other people, Richard's going to be there, John's going to be there, Musquasson's going to be there, other people are going to be there. And I don't have to. So like if something happens, I'm a single mom. So like, something comes up, all right, I'm not there this week, but once it becomes regular and it's got routine, People know what to do.
They know the two trees. They know
Yeah.
where the rope goes. They know how the
You got it.
microphone works, right? The cis white
You
males
got it.
can wait their turn. I like how you work your mic. I know in some of our organizings we do it. We call it an equity mic, right? On Zoom,
Right.
but that reverse order is everybody knows. Well, most people know exactly what that means. So, I mean, that's just such a beautiful approach, and I can only imagine how you must feel then on those days where it's maximum capacity. There are songs, there are speakers waiting at the mic. You hear stories you've never heard before, and it makes all those rainy days, worth it, where
Yes.
you
Yeah.
weren't sure if
Yeah.
anybody would show up or how it would turn out. So, I mean, that's truly beautiful.
And people, and also people appreciate it because, I think there's this idea that some folks have that a demonstration is supposed to be big. You're supposed to fill the streets. Now, how you get to that point, we're not quite sure, but you must fill the streets. And there's really just this photo image in people's minds of that victory moment. Um, and and what's really cool is that if you're afraid of not getting out those numbers, you don't have to set that expectation. You can just be like, no, we're going to be here consistently, and people actually, contrary to feeling like, oh, that wasn't enough, they're like, no, you know what, you were there every single day, even when it was like, and it gets a lot of respect. People appreciate the work, and then they get to actually see the work of organizing. Of course, it takes years to build. It's the slow work of organizing, and you're making it open, and you're making it public, and it's fun.
Who are you appealing to, when you're down there? When you hold up the sign that says defund, who are you appealing to?
uh People who've been fucked over by the police.
Which is a lot.
Yeah, it is.
But I imagine, we need allies as well. Do you find beyond building the communities, which is critical, so we don't want to be dismissive of that, but if we just set that aside, are we growing the community using these tactics? Are we getting allies who maybe don't have experience? Like they hear these women telling stories of trafficking, and they hear of the 60s scoop or, acts of police brutality. Are they stopping and staying?
Yeah.
That must be a real disruption for their night, especially in some of these locations. Maybe they're going out, they want to have a good time, they stumble across this, that's the impact you're going for, eh?
Well, it's very easy to just drive by if you want. It's very easy to walk by if you want. But if you smell the sweetgrass burning, you see this group of people, and sometimes it is a nice big group. Like, it's pretty hard to miss a lot of the time. We can be, like, whoa, okay, there's something happening here, and it's also positive. So it's so important to keep it fun. Like, bring some food, individually wrapped food, so that we can share it. It's got some COVID safety there, and then and also just like so there's food, there's music, keeping it upbeat and keeping it fun. Having a sound system where someone gets to be. Joey is usually our DJ. She's got the best tunes. So it changes people's day. But then when we can always say, well, we're here next Thursday, and I'm like, all right. And then sometimes they show up, and there's also a lot of contact with encampments that have been evicted, right? So when we had our very first gathering on July 1st last year in front of Toronto Police Headquarters, and that was shortly after the residential school graves had been found. Now, we didn't know when we were first setting up that location that the graves were going to be found, because we were planning it before the news broke. Anything that comes up can naturally in some way fit into this anti-colonial struggle. And so that made a connection. So in terms of growing the movement, that meant that there was this really solid connection with Indigenous communities, Indigenous folks who are organizing here in Toronto. When something comes up in the news about another shooting of a Black person, by Peel Police, or someone in Toronto, or there's immediately there's some more people who connect to that, who can connect to that spot. And a lot of folks during the encampment evictions here in Toronto last summer made a direct connection. And so it naturally allows for us to connect to things that are going on in the city that, all the left-wing struggles can connect to it. If you're a left-wing activist, you got a strong interest in defunding the police.
Well, yeah, your messaging is certainly anti-capitalist as well as anti-colonial, which essentially are tied to one another. We know that. Would you say most of the people that participate, consider themselves anti-capitalists, or is that a little bit of work that needs to be done?
It's interesting you'd ask that because, I definitely see this as a anti-capitalist, a socialist struggle. Like, ultimately, I want us to, I think we need an international socialist movement to overturn imperialism, and especially now that we're in the midst of what is emerging as another imperial war. And certainly I take it from a socialist perspective, an anti-capitalist perspective. When organizing with folks, Indigenous folks here on Turtle Island, that language is not really particular, like that doesn't really engage so much. And so kind of bridging that, the language that that my friend Joey uses to talk about these struggles, and my friend John, they're teaching me about how to organize, and I am learning a lot. There's a different method of grassroots organizing that Joey and John apply. And similarly, I've got this method that I've been using. And so so it's a little bit like learning each other's language, like talking about the terms that get used. And so, yes, there is definitely work there. We're doing that work with each other.
I like that, with each other, because certainly being Indigenous led provides that alternate perspective, one that we're trying to amplify, right, as a possible solution to all the issues that, we face as a society. So, yeah, our end goal, I think, is shared there, a socialist revolution. And this work has to go on so many different levels, right? You talk about filling the streets. We do have to fill the streets eventually.
Yeah.
But I definitely wrote that quote down from you. I feel like I want it on a T-shirt. You can't demonstrate power until you've organized it. And so this network building, these connections, it's what a beautiful foray into activism should someone stumble across this and open their eyes and join in and join up the next Thursday. I think that's just such a kind of organic grassroots approach. And you say sometimes it's small numbers, sometimes it's large numbers, but you've described so many different groups already that are interconnected and have very similar tactics, maybe not the same, but, this consistency, this woven allyship where, it's trade and labor and what do you need and how can you help us? And that is just so wonderful. Can you remember your first experience with activism? Was it anything like this?
I can remember. Yeah. So so the very first time my dad was reading a book by Linda McQuaig called Behind Closed Doors. And it was just when the GST was being introduced, which was a regressive tax. This book was about the big businesses paying nothing for a huge tax breaks.
How old are you?
And that this is where I was 11.
Okay.
so I was, I didn't have a whole lot else going on at the time, so I had time on my hands, and I wrote this letter to Michael Wilson and underlined things in red, this makes me mad. I had my marker underneath there. And then I went around the neighborhood getting signatures, and that was just so much fun. I mailed it to him and and didn't get a response. And then my dad said, well, you can mail it to our MPP. He's a liberal. That guy's in the opposition. I'm like, okay. So I sent it to him. And then I got a response from Michael Wilson. I was so excited. And apparently the petitions got read in the House. And anyway, that was the first thing. That was really exciting. And then they're like, okay, I want to do something else because that's a real buzz. I really like that. And then, next year I was in grade 6 and my dad was listening to this radio program by David Suzuki called "It's a Matter of Survival." It's about climate change and about the future if we continue on the path of carbon consumption. And it was so scary. I was like, oh my God, I have to do something, but I can't just listen to this and not do anything. This is horrible. So I started this club, and we'd meet in the library every Wednesday and listen to these tapes. But it got kind of boring. And then my wonderful science teacher from the previous year stepped in, and this guy really made a difference. And I begged and begged, please, Mr. Gugino, will you please? And I'm busy. I've got all these, please, please, please. And so he decided to supervise it. So we had a staff person. And then he hooked us up with an environmentalist who now has a park named after him in Aurora. And I'm trying to remember his name now. It'll probably come to me, but it's slipped my mind at this moment. And he was organizing to save a forest that I didn't even know was due to be sold to a land developer right behind my house, right near us. And it's a beautiful little forest. And there was a sign up that I hadn't, that went up around the same time that I wouldn't have noticed, saying that it was they were going to mow the whole thing down. And there were some counselors organizing to fight that. And so Mr. Gugino helped organize his students, who I realize now in retrospect, he was encouraging to come to our weekly meetings in the library. And they organized, and they got 500 signatures. And then Klaus Werenberg, that's the name of the activist. And so Klaus Werenberg came and visited my house and talked to my dad and helped me figure out, okay, looks like they're taking deputations. First time I ever heard of a deputation. You can go to City Hall or Town Council, Aurora. Very conservative town. Very
Still
conservative,
is.
by the way. I love my whatever. I was just like, oh my God. But so we could depute, and so we got on the list and we presented our petition. And then later, the mayor of the town, there were a lot of counselors working hard on this, came and visited our environmental club for lunch to give his side of the story. And then the parents showed up, and I was a little bit concerned. I didn't really want him to come, but he did. And we got to ask him questions. And I recall being kind of angry toward him, not really, but anyway, but he came and did this. But that was something, right? And so I was like, okay. And then quite frankly, Jessa, and they didn't burn down. You know what? I didn't even realize I'd lost track of that forest. I didn't know, because it didn't get taken down.
That was going to be my question. Did you save the forest, Anna?
Yeah, it did get saved. The city councilors and Klaus Werenberg, yeah. And also, I imagine, I realize now, if the mayor came to visit our school, he must have thought that had some impact. I don't know. He took a little time out to give his side of the story. But I thought that when it didn't get taken, I did not think that we had succeeded. I never imagined that we would. And I just assumed that it must have been another region. Because, they play these little games about which area. They'll get you lost in the details. And I got confused by the details and thought that they just meant some other region of that wooded area that was more sparse. And I thought that for decades. And then eating lunch with, came to visit my dad for dinner once. He goes, well, you saved that spot. I'm like, what? And he goes, well, they had a sign. He reminded me of the sign, which had been posted right next to the most densely wooded area. He said, well, they took it down. And I was like, you're right. They did. That is exactly what happened. My God, they would have taken it, and there, of course, there are a whole lot of, it was a whole lot of work that went into that. And we just got to kind of, be part of it. But that was an exciting thing. And then I basically didn't do any activism again, Jessa. That was the peak of my political life until university, when I got into York, when I went to York University and ran into an amazing group of activists. Joel Harden was one of those, and just really amazing. That was when I discovered socialism and real grassroots activism and direct action. It was a wonderful mentoring experience, and just met such wonderful people, and I credit them with a lot of my knowledge today. So good folks there. I can name a whole, but there are a lot. They're all still, a lot of them are still on the left today.
I very similar. Like I went to York as well for political science, and I wouldn't say like that's where I started my activism, but that was very full of Marxists, that school, right? Thankfully.
Yes.
I had a lot of fun with really great professors like David McNally comes top to mind. I was lucky to have him, especially if we're going to talk about anti-racism, right? But that was such a nice story about the forest, Anna. Like, you say it kind of dismissively, but, you know, deputizing and learning those processes and the levers of power and who you had to kind of go to. I mean, you were getting that instruction quite early, which, you know, regardless whether you used it for a few years is not the point. And it's so funny because you're taking a completely different approach now, right? Like, we've all signed the petitions. We've all written to politicians. We know where most of the time that goes, even though you were successful. You saved the dang forest. But, you know, police, we won't defund the police through petitions. We know that.
Right.
Do you have any political allies in your work? You know, you ever had any elected politicians down there helping boost your visibility? Or is this a bit of a hard sell for those folks?
I'm not saying that they wouldn't, but Jessa, oh my God, you know, like, I mean, so I've done, yeah, you know, I think you really identified the path there, you know, and that was my first time being on a council and listening to them say, well, you know what, we have a nice project for you. Would you like to be on our environmental committee? Okay. Now, so we're thinking you could go out with your friends and pick up garbage, you know, or do something with you know, with blue boxes, which had just come out, you know, and I'm thinking, no, we want to stop the corporations from polluting, right? But that's not what you guys want to do. You want
to just keep me busy.
You know, to pick up pollute. Right.
Like I had my son picking up sticks earlier.
Yeah, you know, I'm not like sure, but you know, like, I'm not liking where this is going. And of course, that's exactly what happens for as long as you're involved in bureaucratic organizing. And I'm not saying that it doesn't have its merits, but you know, I was very active in my union. I was on the executive of my union for a while, and did a lot of work with folks trying, you know, organizing, trying to build a community organizing team, like a committee that would. I mean, what I wanted to see was a citywide network of parent teacher, community teacher councils sponsored by the union, right? And so we really worked hard on this. The thing is that it's very, community organizing is really antithetical to a lot of the established bureaucracies that we use in politics. A lot of that machinery just doesn't operate that way. And so there's a point where like I just decided, well, it seems that I just, you know, the higher you go up the ladder, the less maneuverability it has. Do I have more power to do stuff, or do I just have more visibility?
So restrictive.
Yeah, like this isn't fun.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm not saying it doesn't have a place. Like mobilize, you can revive a union. You can you know, do incredible work. But I think it's. But I can't say that I've really focused on trying to get the attention of politicians. When my spouse was still alive, I was married to. I really loved my dude. He was awesome. He was my comrade, and he was with me during a lot of union organizing. And he used to say, "Anna, you just don't get caught up with these big names. Ignore them. That's not who you're trying to organize. Like, they're already political. Don't worry about that. Like, forget them." Right? Organize the people who don't have an organization yet, to like be with those folks. That's who you need to throw your, you know, your power. That's who you want to support. And it just makes so much sense to me now.
That is good advice.
Yeah. You know, and then if politicians want to show up, you know, maybe we'll let them.
Yeah. I mean, the amount of wheel spinning that I see people do to just get the ear of, you know, a certain critic, to get a certain policy to a certain table. It takes so much effort, and like you essentially have to sell your soul half the time because you have to drift to center to make anything palatable enough for some of those people. But I was talking to a guest earlier about like clout chasing too. So, you know, if you somehow if if there are politicians drawn to your actions, sometimes you start to wonder, am I doing the right thing? Is this become
That's right.
too too soft, too easy for them to glom onto, without any substance? So not to mention
Yeah.
it pushes people away to the partisanship and whatnot. But I thought, like, it's really hard to even hear a lot of politicians talk about defunding the police. I know Matthew Green has been pretty vocal, and Joel, I think, has said a little bit, but um, right now the party on the left, the NDP, currently supports more RCMP funding, and it's really not on the political agenda. How do we get it there, though? We need those people to actually fix the budgets, right? So, here in Toronto, I guess you're really talking, God help you, John Tory. Please don't let him win again, because that man will never defund the police, not a nickel.
Right.
So how do you
Right.
get them? Like, we build these communities, but your banner has a goal, right? Like, how do we get
Yeah.
there? How do we?
Well, there has been some criticism. The only the criticism that I agree with most in terms of that banner is that it should say abolish the police.
All right, yeah,
And yeah,
we'll get there. I will.
we'll
One,
get that.
one
You know
step at
what?
a time, man.
And that was one of the first criticisms that struck me. And I mean, the thing is that like I'm also aware that as long as we think, if we think about how are we going to get them, and then there's another way of thinking. It's like, well, it's not about them. We're going to build. I mean, revolution, and that is a good way to think, because even if if you think in those terms, you are bound to apply more pressure. And in fact, the language in what we say, we don't say that we are asking them to defund. We are it's to compel a transfer of wealth from police, military, and big business into sustainable infrastructure owned by the people or managed by, I forget exactly, but like in the hands of, owned and controlled by the people. And so how we compel that, everything is on the table.
That just doesn't fit on a banner. That's right. Like you may have, that's a mouthful, but let's break that down a little bit. So a transfer of wealth from essentially the most powerful forces in our society will meet a lot of resistance, right? So you're saying your goal then is to build communities until they are large enough to withstand that resistance. Right. Damn the politicians that might be in our way at the time.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, even, when I ask you who you're appealing to, and you definitely have made it clear, like, I'm not appealing to John Tory. We have given up hope on that man or his actions. But, in the end, they will only act once there is a massive movement underneath them. Or, of course, they are swept away by it, which would be even better. So it's not a criticism. In fact, like it's a diversification of tactics, right? Like someone can still be going into John Tory's office and trying to ask him to defund the police if that's what floats their boat. But clearly we need enough people in the movement connected to one another to make it clear that that's a demand, not an ask. Do you find that you are building? Do you continue to have momentum?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. It's, it's, and I think a lot of that comes out at Landback Square, actually, and it's, both of them, like, got more of a solid crew that comes out, and then we connect with other groups. And then, being able, it also meant that we were able to carry off, we did a peace demonstration a little while ago that was sort of affiliated, not completely under the banner of our same organization. But once you've established that you are regular, consistent, people know where to find you. You end up so much more able to connect to the other organizing that's going on. And I think right now, given how, like, I'm just going to get back to that topic, it's kind of like a reform or revolution kind of question, right? Are we asking them, or are we going to do it ourselves? And right now we're watching the neoliberal establishment lose credibility on a scale that I don't think we've seen. Certainly, not in not in our generation. Um, and we've actually, and one really blatant symptom of this is, rampant conspiracy theories, far right movements that can boldly march around, with near impunity, right? Like these things happen at revolutionary moments, based on what based on whatever, studying I've done, it's because the system is actually so, uh, has lost so much credibility, and the economic system is just not functioning to keep most people fed and content. And then, there's some middle class folks with a little bit, with privilege and anger and whatever, will take this far right route. But there's a power vacuum, right? And then there's a competition. And I think, we saw this in the 30s, like who's going to fill that power vacuum. And there was similar, stuff was going on in Europe around the time of the First World War, right? And that's very much like that competition between the right and the left is very much where, Rosa Luxemburg's movement and where the Russian Revolution came from, and very much the peace movement that actually was very successful. We don't talk about World War I being an armistice very often. That in fact, the Russian Revolution, people rising up in a revolution saying, no, we don't want this war anymore, was very much a part of that, stopping an imperialist war. That the peace movement and a movement for international socialism has very much like that revolutionary fire to it, that it has that source. That when the wars become intolerable, when the situation it becomes intolerable, and it's a moment of crisis. That's very often where people decide that there absolutely has to be a drastic change, and so I see that when we talk about whether we're lobbying someone else or just actually saying, well, what if we did it? Like if you organize always, like. I remember someone said this to me once and I never forgot it, that a revolution doesn't just happen because you organize and overthrow the establishment. It also happens when the establishment is weak, because part of what's going on is that there's kind of a collapse of the establishment. It stops working so well. Tsar Nicholas doesn't have his shit together, and it's all chaos. And so whoever is the most organized basically becomes the power. And so always to organize so that you are the most organized group around, so that when stuff stops working, you're the one who fills in the power vacuum. That can be a sudden change, or it can be gradual. Whoever is the most organized, will set the tone politically.
That terrifies me at the moment, because although, love what you're doing, but you have to admit there's a huge vacuum on the left in terms of like leadership or consolidation, and the right, demonstrated by the, most recently the occupations of Ottawa. Like we've not even Occupy Toronto didn't occupy that kind of space.
Well, that's good. It's okay. You can talk.
But it's like, it's kind of like misogynistic, like actually women are usually quite more brave. But do you know what I mean? Like that, I hate to give it any kind of credit, but like that is a huge success on an organizing scale, especially during a pandemic when people are poor, struggling, mostly wanting to stay inside. And they were able to not just occupy Ottawa, but have all of these solidarity actions that are still continuing today. So yeah, that's why you see me making those faces, is that's me cringing when you say, in this absence of power, who will take over? And I think if we were to flip that coin right now today, that would not be the left, that would not be us. So how do we take our Thursday action, along with all the other work that your comrades are doing across Turtle Island and beyond, and get to that point? What are we missing? What work needs to be done? So I told you earlier, I'd ask you if there were 1,000 Annas, what would they be doing right now? Would you be in 1,000 different police headquarters or?
Be disrupting more. Oh, you know what, Jessa? I was thinking about this with some of my friends, because sometimes you got to just take a step back and not ask yourself what you're willing to do, but what needs to be done. And one thing that I've realized and that I've learned from the people who I organize with is that you really need to always be disrupting. And I didn't that's not necessarily what I wanted to hear, because sometimes I don't want to. I don't want to get arrested.
Yeah, that's not the easy way out.
But then I am with other friends who clearly who are just going to be there regardless. I'm like, okay, well, I got a ton of privilege, and here are my friends who don't have that much privilege. They're not scared. Okay, all right. So then I realized actually disrupting, like when you don't have the numbers, but you just constantly disrupt, you get, first of all, you get more attention, you draw more people. You build your own courage, and you make things difficult for the opposition, and you manage to you pack a harder punch, and it's a way of accomplishing more. And so I was thinking we were talking, I said, really what we need to start doing, we need to start occupying some of these vacant apartments. And we got a massive homeless crisis here in Toronto. It's appalling. People can't afford to live in their own city, and tons of people are on the street. And I know lots of people who've been on and off homeless, and so thinking about I think the answer is that you keep disrupting. I think block whatever makes the established, whatever throws a wrench into things. And I'm not the expert on that. Like, in truth, this is where I'm learning from my comrades. This is where I'm learning from my friends, because I wouldn't have blocked the young street at Dundas, a young in Dundas. I didn't have that much guts. My friends had that much guts. I went and stood with them, and I'm very glad for that. So I'm following their lead right now. But I do believe that you always have to be getting, when you don't have the numbers, and you need to increase the visibility, and there's like a balance, because you don't want to alienate yourself from most people. Your actions have to be clearly justified. And when the law is as meaning, really, when the law is as arbitrary as I see it being right now. Like, a good friend of mine was just a number of people who I know, one particular good friend, Richard, was just taken right off the street, followed by plainclothes officers after a press conference about an encampment clearing, and just thrown into a van, and into a police van, and for some stupid thing. Apparently they alleged that he threw a water bottle way back during the Lamport Stadium. They don't even have, there's no evidence of it. And so when it's that arbitrary, I think that there's a lot to be said for just say, okay, well, they'll make the law whatever they want. So let's just decide what is justified, what makes sense, what will be recognized as reasonable to most people, to most well-thinking people, well-intentioned people, and just follow that and disrupt, and continue to organize and continue to disrupt. And and that means traffic, it means occupations.
Yeah, I think maybe that's where...
And it means courage and friends.
That you kind of talk about limitations. You don't call them that, but needing to make sure that, you don't push the boundaries so far as you alienate the same people that you are trying to draw to the movement. And I think that's perhaps where the right went wrong, putting up a hot tub, and defacing people for having rainbow flags, the dog shit thrown at people. And, they took disruption to a whole new level, and it then became essentially meaningless. It just became this act of rage. The messaging got lost, and thankfully, some people distanced themselves from them. But at the same time, you want to keep pushing those boundaries too, right? So how do you find that balance between, making sure you're palatable, but also disruptive enough that it matters, right? So because that in political organizing, that's what I find so frustrating too, is often policies or actions have to be passed through so many people, and well, this group of voters won't like that, so why bother, even though it's the right thing to do. And I hate that. Like, that is just so limiting. So
well, that's why people love you. Because you don't, and people do care. Like, people are smarter in their heart than they are in their head. Like, so many people will disagree.
Yeah.
Because it feels like the safest thing to say, but inside they're like, I like what she's doing. And on a deep level, they're like, yeah, keep going, and it inspires people. And, and that's what leading is about. It's not the same thing as chasing votes or being a political weather vane. And you're not that, and that's what's memorable. Like, that's what people are going to remember, like these people who just care about getting reelected. No one's going to friggin' remember them in 15, 20. No one cares.
No, and they're so ineffective
they don't,
too.
There's nothing to remember.
Yeah.
No change.
No, and sometimes I ask in interviews, what's one policy that would make you stop doing what you're doing? Like, if there's specific funding, sometimes public education, whatnot. But when you're coming from an anti-capitalist smash the system, it's the work is never done, right? So settling for middle of the road, actions or policies is kind of, I think we're just so beyond that, right? It's like, there's a time and a place for everything. There's the easy in, right? You want to draw people into the easy thing that's not so, the people who don't want to get arrested, right? Let them kind of stand in the background, get more brave, understand the need for disruption and its effectiveness. So, like, I really do appreciate the time you spent here today, driving that point home, that the need for disruption, because that's, part of what we're doing here with this podcast is, it's a bit of disillusionment with the electoral system and the amount of energy that really good people are spending inside those toxic spaces. So hopefully
they are toxic.
They are. Oh, firsthand knowledge, know it. I've seen so many friends damaged through it, but I have never really seen that kind of toxicity in any kind of organizing circles I've been in. There's always problem characters. You always have the same issues of perhaps being infiltrated by centrists or, just personal issues that might erupt, but it's never to that level of, repression that you can feel inside. So, like, hearing you describe spoken word and, even just picturing two folks holding the banner in the rain is like so heartwarming to me, because I've been there, when you have no idea who's going to show up. You just know you and a friend are, hopefully. And so, I think
we did that with the KKK convoy go home banner. Like we had like a few, but people appreciated it, and it was just this little bit of disruption. It was friggin' something,
at a time where we needed that too. We needed to see some of our comrades, instead of watching the convoy, we needed to see a little fight back there. So I wish I was in the city, Anna. Like, I'm up here in Sutton. I'm a city girl. I grew up in Scarborough. So when you say Malvern, I'm in. I love my town. Right? If anyone's listening, I'm in Sutton. Yeah. So just.
I thought you were out east.
No, what do you mean?
In Ontario?
Yeah.
I thought you were down east.
No, I'm an Ontario girl. I'm just an hour out of the city, so like there's
I grew up in Aurora, Thorncliffe Park, and then Aurora.
Yes, I'm in Georgia.
So I'm with you. I know where that is. I know Sutton.
Yeah. So, I wish I was in the city, because the thought of that being so accessible, even your banner drop, I was like, I say to my partner all the time, like, we have to move back into the city, can't afford it, right? I'm just like, the amount of networking and connections, or that what you said, if you just know that there's a bad day and there's going to be some fighting comrades there on a Thursday, and you can show up and just be a part of it, if nothing else. There was a time where we all went out and hit the pots and pans at some, not during COVID. Yes. During the Maple Spring, right? When the Quebec students were doing it. And we set it up every in a park. I can't remember which park. I think we were in Moss Park every week, and some of the neighbors came out. And the first time it's 2 people, then 4 people, then more people. And then it started to dwindle, right? Because we needed to add something to it. We didn't. And so it died. But I love that you're just so consistent and so determined. And, when I say like, what's your end goal? And you're like, yeah, we're not even close to there. So this is what I'm doing for the next foreseeable future.
But there is an end goal. And I actually really want to state it, because the disruption is important. It's also important to build an organization that that has enough integrity, moral integrity and structural integrity, that you're confident that actually, we could, if we could build a world like this, if this could be the world, this is something that I could live in, that I would want my children to live in. Like, this is, because building something better is what fascism doesn't do. It will use rhetoric and blame and appeal to the working class frustration, get funded by big capital, and but never propose a program to correct the problem. And so disrupting the establishment, while at the same time building an organization that you really are, that you feel at home in, that makes other people feel at home, that has processes for reconciliation within it, that has equity-based processes, that shares resources, that has real integrity, then you're doing something more lasting than what those assholes were doing, with the in Ottawa, like that, and people do see it. It has staying power, and there's always the prospect of like long-term resistance, right? Like like a lot of movements have sustained the war for many, many years, right? With that kind of defense, protracted. Thank you for calling up the word I was looking for. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Were you at Occupy, Anna?
I wish I was.
Because I think that's...
No, I walked around it. I was in my first few years of teaching. I had my nose in the books. I was teaching at that point and didn't really get out very much.
Because it's what you describe in the way that, obviously it had its issues, but the attempt was there to demonstrate an alternative way to live, an alternative way to make communities and to lean on each other and to celebrate each other and educate each other. And that's what it was. It had other things, but it had the same critique that you sometimes might face, where the goals were so broad because the vision was just so transformative. It wasn't a single policy we wanted. We needed something you've never seen before, people. So we may have different ideas on what that looks like right now, but we know how we're going to get there. And so the vision wasn't super clear at the end, but what it looked like in the now was like, that was clear. We just wanted it bigger. If we could just make this park to the next park, to the next park, to the bigger community. If we could operate Turtle Island in this fashion, we would start to understand how to undo what we've done. And so I totally appreciate that as an end goal. And you're right, that's something fascism certainly doesn't do. The right does not do. What I saw them kind of replicate, instead of like this loving community, was a more militaristic replication on Ottawa, right? They had the terminology they were using amongst themselves, the tactics they were using were very combative. It didn't that's really, if you use them as your vision of what you wanted it to be and compared, the park and Occupy, or your square, not your square, Landback Square, to that. And it's wondering why people would be drawn to that vision versus the one that, you've demonstrated, so I would love to be able to amplify what you're doing. So what can people do?
Where's your police headquarters in Sutton?
It's just, we've got a York Region Police just down the street off of Baseline. I'm in a community where people still fly Confederate flags, and it's not great in that terms, but that just means there's definitely lots of work to do. But how can people listening now help you specifically? Let's just remind people where a few of these items are. So you are every Thursday. Where?
Yep. 40 College, and that is right near Bay and College, and it's the Metro Toronto Police Headquarters. And every Thursday at 5 o'clock, and sometimes we'll give like a high five to people to remind folks, 5, see you at 5. Right in front of the police headquarters, and there's music, and there's food. If you want to bring a little bit, that's great. And the weather's getting nice, and so we're going to be there. And very often on Sunday, probably more consistently coming up at Yonge and Dundas at 4 o'clock on Sundays. So that's where we are. That's where we can be found that's where we can be found in Toronto.
And I it still makes me think back. So you know where to find Anna. I imagine hopefully it's all comrades listening. I'm sure the police know just where to find you at any given time anyway.
Sometimes we get some assholes. No, we do. There's, you get people you don't want sometimes.
No doubt.
Yeah. And
what do you do then?
And so, reading up on, I don't think I can repeat what well, there's this one time, someone joined our group who actually used to be a member of the far right and had made like real effort. It just said, I went through this thing and I've left and I've like publicly disavowed everything. And I've, and I like now do this work to denounce and, and I forget. And somehow someone came to harass him. I forget exactly what it was. They would just kind of like stood there and just, be physically present and, sorry, no, please take your camera elsewhere, but always trying to always stay calm, be the calmest person there. Police, it's really strange to me when the police start to come out, and to me, it's such an image of the overfunding. You've got so much time on your hands, like really grotesque amounts of time on your hands. Don't tell me this is a difficult job, okay? People who work in the public sector, the actual public serving sector, know what it means to work hard because they don't have enough people to do the work that they have. You have too many people. You don't know what to do with yourselves. You're standing here watching us, and what have we done? We've had, I don't think we've had a whole lot of trouble with far right people showing up. Actually, I'd have to, but I think that whenever it looks like things could get tricky, start recording. Police. When we did a walk to Queen's Park and from our spot. Connected it to other events. It's always like a piece that you can connect to other parts, and to lay some shoes down by the John A. Macdonald statue. And it was very clear that, there were police there around us, we're not like these, I guess the security officers and also some police, just wouldn't go away. And they'd kind of come up from behind. They're very sneaky like that. I think that there's any quality that I would attribute to them more than anything. It's certainly not courage, but sneakiness. Yeah.
Very stealth, like cats.
Yeah, like you guys are just but
the bikes don't make any noise, right?
Yeah. No, I know. Yeah, man. I try to think what else I was going to say. I don't know.
Don't worry. Yeah, we won't give too much air to what the right does to drive us nuts. But let me just take a look. Is there anything I didn't ask you that I should have asked you?
No. It's really great to finally meet you, Jessa.
I know,
I love your posts. I love reading your stuff.
Thank you. We followed each other on Facebook. We've never connected like this, but I got to find out everything I kind of wanted from you because it was really just about picking your brain about why you do what you do. I appreciate that you do what you do, and I'm definitely going to make an effort to be down there one Thursday. I'm actually in the city soon, so I will connect with you before I come down.
Okay, sounds good.
Like in all things that we do, there is a team behind Blueprints of Disruption. I want to give a big thank you to our producers, Santiago, Hello Quintero, and Jay Woodruff. Our show is also made possible by the support of our listeners. So if you appreciate our content and would like to become a patron, please visit us at www.patreon.com/BP of Disruption. So if you know of any work that should be amplified or want to provide feedback of our show, please reach out to us on Twitter at BP of Disruption. Blueprints of Disruption is a project of New Left Media, an independent employee-owned company.